Ara Bagdasarian, co-founder of Omnilert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. You were on the Entrepreneur Bash panel.
Yes.
Here we're University of Maryland campus where the Terps play, and this is your home ground. Really appreciate your having joined the panel, and thanks for taking time. You're an inspiration to aspiring entrepreneurs, people that have started companies, and would love to get more of a feel for how you decided that process of starting Omnilert, which came out of a real estate texting idea that you had. Can you tell us about that?
It did. In the early part of the turn of the century, the 21st century, the real estate market in the Washington, D.C. area was just completely on fire. You couldn't find a house in time. By the time it was on the MLS listings, by the time a home buyer got the listings, the house was already sold, under contract. And my wife and I were looking at the time in Loudoun County, and after about 24 failed attempts to find a house that we could actually purchase, the idea arose, why not use text messaging to instantly notify a home buyer of a new listing? So you could press a button, connect with a real estate agent, and schedule a viewing of the home. That would probably make it a little easier for consumers to find a home during that time period. Well, I ran the idea by a number of realtors, and the only realtor that gave me a very warm response was the realtor selling us our house. And the market just wasn't ready yet. The realtors just couldn't put their hands around it. Consumers, on the other hand, seemed to get it, but it just was not catching on with the real estate market, that was our customer that we needed to work with. Well, during the process of testing the market, getting feedback, I happened to come across an article about a student at Lehigh University in 1987 who was brutally raped and murdered in her dorm room. And there was a criminal on campus that had done this already that day, and the students were unaware. At the time, it was very difficult to communicate with students that quickly. So after the assault and murder, her family was outraged, like any family would be, and they investigated, and they concluded that had the students have been notified in a timely manner of this criminal, her life could have been spared. They proceeded to lobby Congress, and in 1990 they passed the Campus Safety Act. As soon as I read that article, I called my partner and said, "Hey, Nick, we need to focus on this market. There's a blaring problem here. There's no better way to communicate safety information to students than via their cell phone using text messaging." And during that time period, most people were not using texting in the U.S. It was college kids. The 18 to 24-year-old market was very acclimated with cell phone technology. So we immediately called the family of the Security on Campus organization, explained to them this concept. They were fully supportive of the idea, and so we actually decided to prototype this and try to find our first customer.
So you had this idea fueled by an incredible need and obviously something horrific that had happened, and a real problem that needed to be solved in terms of notifying students. How did you go from the point of you had the idea, you knew you wanted to go do a prototype, how did you actually get the business going and get the first real life customer?
Once we validated the whole concept of using text messages to communicate emergency information with students, we developed a prototype, a mock-up of what the system would look like, how it would operate. We created some brochures that explained how the system would work once developed. And through a contact, we met with a local community college who the vice president instantly got the idea. He was on board from day one, from our first conversation, saw the value. So they signed on as a customer. We took the funds from the sale of that first customer and put it back into the company to actually develop the product as we proposed in the prototype.
So this is an important point because you talk about this in a book that you did. This is one of your lemonade stand rules, which is get your customers to pay. That you have a viable idea if you have a customer that will pay for it. So literally from that point were you off and running? You had the first customer and you just knew we're onto it and this is it.
After we secured the first customer, it was still difficult to secure the next customer, and it took a while because it was a new concept at that time. It was very new. Most school administrators, police chiefs were unaware of text messaging. It wasn't used by adults. Why would anyone want to send text messages to students for emergency communications? But we stuck in, we did secure customers, and we were able to keep the operations going until we secured our first major customer, which was Pennsylvania State University.
So you secured Pennsylvania State, and you're now at the point where it's over 800 college campuses that use Omnilert. What has been the recipe there? It's nice to have an idea. It's nice that you got one customer. It's nice that you even got one big customer. But beyond that, you're now standing as the best known and the biggest provider of this service on college campuses. How did you get to 800?
Through our reputation is what really fueled our growth. The higher education market is we decided one of our principles is do not compete. And when we first looked at the market opportunity for emergency notifications in higher education, there was no other players in the space. It was an unsolved problem that needed a remedy. So we were first in that space. We developed a reputation very quickly. It's all about the customer experience. From day one, from the way the phone is answered to the way the account is set up, the way that support is handled, it is all about the experience with the customer, and your reputation is what drives that growth. In fact, we employ what we call storytelling. Early on, every customer that we signed up during the first 3 years, we dropped a press release. We sought media coverage to help tell the story. There's no better means of advertising than to have other people talking about what you are doing, because it's from an advertiser's perspective, nobody believes the advertisers anymore.
So I kind of get the point, which is you don't want to compete, but you know, unfortunately, the way the world is, there have been these tragedies on college campuses, and so, you know, in a way, the need for Omnilert was proven. And after some of these tragedies, I think you've said in the past, hundreds of competitors sprang up who all offered solutions. And now, so clearly it's a competitive field. What do you do now? How do you now handle a field where it's totally validated and everyone's jumping in?
That's when you need to redefine the rules of the game, redefine the playing field. And that's what we have always done. From day one, the message or the need was text messaging. We've been the first to migrate to or to evolve into multimodal communications, meaning sending messages to every device possible on campus. We were the first with mobile apps. We were the first with Facebook and Twitter integration, first with digital signage integration. So constantly leading the pack as far as defining a battlefield and starting defining the rules by which the rest of the market will follow.
Ara, what's your advice for an aspiring entrepreneur? Somebody is starting right now and they have an idea, but that's all they've got. What do you advise that person?
Well, I would advise someone who's considering starting a business to realize that the obstacles are not as great as you would imagine them to be, especially now in the 21st century with the internet as a resource that you could span the globe with a business based out of a bedroom even. So their obstacles are not there. I speak to entrepreneurs all the time, or would-be entrepreneurs, and where they get stuck, they have the idea. Most everybody has an idea, but where they get stuck is the notion that the first step I need to do is write a 200-page business plan and draw my projections and the exit strategy and develop the whole notion on paper. And secondly, I need to go and find funding. I need a venture capital firm or angel investor or bank loan in order to get my business started. And it's overwhelming, and the idea stops. It dies on the vine at that point. What they can do is a method I mentioned earlier, is prototyping. Prototype the idea. It could be a product or a service. If you can sell that product as a prototype, then you have proven that there is market demand for your product. Take the sale money and put it back into the business. I always say that we have 5,000 investors for Omnilert, and they're all our customers. Our customers are our investors, so we're focused on keeping our customers happy and satisfied and always exceeding their expectations because we're accountable to them.
Ara, what's the biggest mistake you see entrepreneurs making?
One of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make is listening to other people, share their opinions. Because if you believe what you're doing and you believe it's the right thing, stick with it, stick with your guns, and make sure that it happens. Everyone has opinions. People will put you down and proclaim that they know better than you do. But if you believe in what you're doing, stick with it.
Ara Bagdasarian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
and
Bob.
for your great advice. Best of success with Omnilert.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.